There we go. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, great. Thank you for joining us, and we'll proceed. There are a number of us here in the sanctuary, and then of course people who are joining in at home. And Robin Lyttle are you vice president of the board?
I'm not sure what I am at this point. I'm the grants administrator actually, and acting treasurer. And we have another president and several other officers who are in the other positions. But I'm a founding member, and the grants administration part is what I want to be talking to, explaining to you all today too, of what allowed us to create these tours.
Yeah. Well, we'll defer to you, and we can get started with what you have to share with us.
Okay. I wonder if I can share my screen. I'll try in a minute. And I did message Monica. I know that there's been a lot going on with her lately with the care of her mother. She is Monica's, in addition to taking care of her grandsons, also is the caregiver for her mother, who's had several strokes. And she's been going through a cycle of staying up all night and sleeping during the day. So I know that Monica's really been going through it. But long story short, and I'm sure she would never tell you that, so please talk amongst yourselves. But we at the Shenandoah Valley Black Heritage Project started in 2013, so this is 10 years. And one of what we would all have always wanted to do was to create African American history tours for tourists and for everyone. When COVID happened, there was a series of grants that came out. There she is. That came out that because it was the grants were directed to nonprofits to help them during the COVID times, and to create programs that would be COVID friendly, so to speak, and get money for it. So it was part of the CARES Act. You all probably have heard of that over the years. And it was for $25,000. It's reimbursable. I'm just wrapping it up now. But what it allowed us to do was and it was a result of COVID, and it was specifically for self-guided tours, which is what Hetty and I have been talking about and trying to explain. And when you do go out, if you see some oopses, because and I'll explain why in a minute, make a gentle note, and we'd love to hear from you. And we're in the midst now, since we've launched the tours, to being able to go back and say, oh yeah, that is a little confusing and things like that. The tours were designed, the grant was designed to, we divided the valley up into 6 regions, and this grant funded 4 regions. That was from basically Berryville to Stanton. In each of the 4 regions, we were able to pay local historians or community members to share their history and identify the sites that they wanted on the tour and to create the tours. And then we took that information and created one-page brochures, and then booklets for anybody who doesn't have a computer or anything, with directions and photos and information about the sites that they chose for their tours. We've created 8 tours, and we are now would like to fundraise and raise the money for the rest of the valley so we can create a whole tour book. But you can go to our website, website rootsrunsdeep.org, and you'll find our tours on that website, complete with downloadable books and booklets and maps. And each site has, I wonder if I should try and do that. Each site has a page, a web page that we're building. Most of the tours have been done. Each tour has a web page for each site, and we're going to be adding material. So we're looking for also, in addition to additions and corrections to the existing tour sites, we want to learn more about other sites that we didn't know about. And this comes from everyone, because a lot of the burial grounds that we're uncovering and the information we're uncovering about that is coming through the white community, because so many burial grounds are on private land and or known by people. And so it's this tour also gave us an opportunity to work with other groups, other conservation groups who are helping us with a database. So as a result of this, we're working with the Shenandoah Alliance and the Allegheny Blue Ridge Alliance, and they're creating a database for us. So and that will eventually also have a story map, so that when you're going along, you'll be able to see an icon, for instance, First Cemetery in a certain area, and you'll touch that, and the information will pop up as to where it is and how you get to it and things like that. We don't publish private cemeteries, that's not part of our tour. We do acknowledge some in our tour booklets, because there are a couple that you can drive by and they look like clumps of ungrown, overgrown area, but they are documented in enslaved burial grounds. So Harrisonburg, just real quickly before I hand it, and I'm sure Monica would like to share things. Harrisonburg was our first tour to do along with Zenda, and Monica and Taya Whitley, who works with us, has just upgraded that tour and gone over it. So it's a great tour, and I think it'll be interesting when you do take a look at it, and there are a lot of sites, so it's a lot of time. But when you do look at, for instance, the first part of the tour has, interestingly enough, history from the early 1800s, when freeborn African Americans owned land down near Court Square. And then it sort of goes from there, and there are sections that, for instance, during the Jim Crow era and around the Friendly City Food Co-op, and then up into the neighborhood, which was a result of the R4 project when that area downtown was destroyed, and the community was moved basically up the hill. And so I found that interesting after doing the tour, just how chronological a lot of it was. So, but again, it's on our website. You can look at it. You can look at the tour sites, and I hope you have a good time. Monica?
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Good. All righty. So I'm Monica Robinson, and I'm the executive director for the Shenandoah Valley Black Heritage Project. I've worked with them for several years. I think there's a motorcycle going by. I began as the internship director and now am the executive director, and am very, very happy with the work that we've done and are doing with the Roots Runs Deep tours. Robin talked with you guys a little bit about the different options that are available in accessing the tours. So I'm going to share my screen just so that I can share the site with you guys and kind of show you, I do like a quick tutorial or something, I guess. So here we go. Let's see. Share. All righty. So everybody can see the Roots Runs Deep website here, correct? Okay, so this is where basically all the magic happens. If this is how you decide that you want to access the tours, you can pick up the map. We have a brochure. You can go to our website here, rootsrundeep.org, or you can decide to access it through the Traipse app. And if you Google Traipse on your cell phone or whatever, you'll be able, or go to the Apple Store or Google Play, you'll be able to download it. So I just want you to see what the icon looks like if this is the way you decide to go. I prefer the Traipse app. My mom prefers the booklet form. She's about 70 couple, and she struggles a little bit with how to maneuver her way around on the Traipse apps, and feels very comfortable with having that piece of paper in front of her to kind of help guide her. Although the tours themselves seem to be, like Robin said, somewhat very much chronological in nature, the tour itself does not have to be done chronologically as they appear in any of the methods that you decide to access them. You can decide for yourself how much or how little time you have. If you want to do 3 to 4 tours, 3 to 4 sites after church one day, or get up early one day and want to do your morning walk and just kind of cover the downtown area, you can map out an individual tour that works for yourself. What I love so much about the Harrisonburg tour is I grew up here. I moved here about the age of 10, and I really had difficulty seeing my footprint or the footprint of my people in the city. I came in the late 70s, and it was a very different Harrisonburg than it is now. Visually different, definitely different in terms of diversity. So we were very much a segregated community at 3 o'clock. So during the day, I had many friends that I associated with at school that were white and Black. And but at the end of the school day, I went back to my respective community and they went back to theirs. And we were once again segregated and knew very little about each other's families, how we celebrated holidays, what we did for fun. So once I ran across the book that was written by, oh goodness, Ryan Bachman's book on Black property ownership in Harrisonburg, and actually sat down and read it, and then kind of started riding around through town and looking at where property was owned by other African Americans in the city, I start being able to see our footprint. And it kind of made me go, wait a minute, I'm seeing a whole different Harrisonburg. And it's definitely time that the story needs to be told. Because until that point, I didn't see where we had any part in the economic development, educational development of the city, planning purposes, infrastructure, all of those important things that make a community and a city a city. I just didn't see us there. And that book began to open my eyes. So I know this afternoon you guys are planning on, a few people are offered a tour that's going to be held by or led by Hetty. But I just kind of wanted you to look and see, and I'll talk just a little bit. Robin talked about what we've covered so far in terms of what we were able to do with the current grant that we're finishing up on. And we are definitely at a halfway point. But what's so good about this halfway point in the way that we've done the launch of these 5 specific areas is that we're able to now gain a little bit more insight from those who came out. We had about 90 people show up at the various sites, and we're getting feedback from them. You know, how about this site? Did anybody think about including this in the book? Or this particular site, the link that goes with it doesn't match. So we're at a halfway point, and we are able to go back, we're able to edit, we're able to add to, delete, and do those things. And it's at a very comfortable pace. So if you look at any of these tour booklets, we don't want you to think that this is it. We said what's going to be there, and that's the end of the story. This isn't our story. This is the story of people who lived in this area. This story comes from the eyes of those who experienced it or their descendants. And that's what makes this history very different from what I learned in school. So let's go back again. Let's see here. I'm trying to actually access the book. So let me go back to the home page. Here we go. Well, there I am. And that's not what I want. All right, so that's the flyer. Robin, I know the book is on here. What am I missing here? That's what I'm missing. Okay. So I'm going to click on Harrisonburg. Sorry. So you're able to download the tour map and booklet below if you'd like and access it that way. So here's where you find that file. But then we also have our brochure listed here so that you can look at the sites. And then you'll see the entire booklet that lists all this. Oh, come on, Monica. When I do the site, this is what, when I do the tour for groups, what I've gotten to the habit of doing is starting out at the top of Ralph Sampson Park. And to me, that particular site for my age group, I'm going to be 55 this summer, kind of starts the footprint where I start to put my foot into that shoe right there, starts at Ralph Sampson Park. Whereas if my mother would do this tour, I would say that she would probably start hers somewhere down near the co-op, because that was the area that was vibrant for them prior to urban renewal. And then my grandmother's footprint would probably go start at a different part of the city. So I start and tell the story as I know it, starting at Ralph Sampson Park. Okay, now I'm gonna go down. Now I'm gonna talk about a few of these sites with you. This will make it better. Okay. I walked past the lot of Otterbein United Methodist Church for many years, thinking, what a beautiful building. And I remember Miss Hackman, who was the triple trio teacher at the high school and who did some voice lessons with me and who played the bells, was a member there. Never did I know at the time that I possibly had descendants who roamed that area as well. So when I learned that Jail Hill was the beginning of an African-American community, I was just floored. I was just floored. Yes.
Real quick, there is a separate page for each of the sites for Harrisonburg. If you go back up to your tours, all the way up, yeah, and click, and then go back one to, well, go back to the tour page to where you can select Harrisonburg. Okay, now down here, see the Harrisonburg over here? Click on that, and then you got Jail Hill.
All right, that'd be easier for you to see.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Not all of our tours have we've been able to do that, but this one is.
Okay, so here we go. So what I did is I went and actually stood at each of these sites. I looked in the book, I looked at the information we had gotten, and I looked at what it possibly looked like then, and then what it looks like now. And I pictured little Monica's running all around this area, and my family members possibly being in this area and what that meant in terms of the history of my family in Harrisonburg. So I stood there, and when I do this, I have to tell you guys that I am very, very moved, and I get very emotional because you can kind of feel, when you think about this, you can feel some of the pain, some of the suffering, some of the struggle of people who were trying to be a part of communities that didn't necessarily want them to be there. And then I thought about, getting up every day and how hard it was for people to go to work, to continue on, to tell their children how important it was to treat people fair and to treat people nice. And although people may not want you here, that God has placed us here for a reason, and we just need to stand and continue on. And so to me, it puts a whole different look on what a struggle really is. And I think as we move as a society further away from all of those bad years, I often reflect and say, I think it's a good thing that people don't focus on slavery. I think it's a good thing that, you know, people are learning to get along. But I also think it's important that in order for that to continue in a positive way, we must remember what happened. We must remember the struggle. We must remember the pain, the suffering, and how we got to where we are today. And I think a lot of our youth don't realize how the struggle even went, and they're so far away from it that they often take advantage of many of the things that we may look back and say, man, people died for us to be able to go up and vote. So I'm going to make it a part of everything that I do on November the 8th to go to the polls and vote, because there was bloodshed. There were people who were turned away multiple times and they kept coming back. And I think that this tour is one of the ways that we can kind of help reach these youth. We can use this as an educational piece. What I'd like to see happen is that this tour isn't the only time that we learn about local history. I would like to see kids growing up maybe coming out doing a tour like this. And we're going to do this with the school here shortly, but making sure that we put forth an effort to tell local history, to tell that local story, because I'm able as an adult to see the major changes that have happened in the city, where we've moved from that community of the past to this very diverse, loving community that, yeah, we still need to work on a few things, but I've been here to witness the changes in the landscape, the changes in the people, the changes in politics, and the changes in economic opportunities, in who lives where in our community, and more importantly, who doesn't live where in our community. So this can be a tool that we can share with all ages in a household. So I am going to go down here and talk about Ralph Sampson Park. All righty. This is where we spend our summers. And what's so important about this is, for many years, I didn't realize that this land was a part of the Hilltop Plantation, and is also the Hilltop Plantation's land is also the home of the Lucy F. Sims Center. And so my backyard lines right up to the park. So my grandkids and my son are able to romp and jump and stomp and play in this wonderful park that, when I was growing up, was very segregated. It was the Black park. When people would say, where y'all meeting at? You know, a lot of people, we didn't say Ralph Sampson Park. We said either Sims or the Black park. So what I like so much about starting here is that I can tell that story about urban renewal and about how we were displaced, and that we were down closer to the center of town. But now when we were displaced, this is where we ended up. This ended up now being somewhat of a center for the Northeast neighborhood that was developed because of the displacement of people during urban renewal. I try to get folks my mom's age, in their 70s, to often reflect on urban renewal and what this booklet means to them and such. And they are still very hurt and displeased by being moved from, and the breaking up of their community is probably the best way to to kind of describe that. So we don't always have pleasant thoughts when we think about that. This is a pleasant thought for me because this was my community growing up. For them, this is a place of harm and trauma. This is a trigger. So this book means so many different things to so many different people. And from there, I move over and I go across, and I am going to pull up, if I can, which is, I'm just going to pull up Newtown Cemetery. Okay, so I leave from there. I walk folks through my yard, and we stand at the top of Kelly Street, and we talk about how many homes were lost. Not everyone who had a home prior to urban renewal got blessed with a home. So I talk about the formation of this building right here, which is Harrisonburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority, which was formed in 1954 as a result of the urban renewal project. And many people see this as a blessing. In our community, we see this as a beginning of another curse, because the formation of the housing authority made many people dependent on subsidized housing, and they were not able to move into what these are right here, the housing units that were built. They weren't able to move from here and buy a home and start creating generational wealth. They had lost so much during urban renewal that it just wasn't there for them. So I try to put the time period in perspective to make people understand when they're walking through the neighborhood that we just don't want you to walk and gawk. A lot of people will be like, whoa. And I mean, just think if a group of Black people were taking a tour through your neighborhood, stopping and looking at your house and kind of wanting to take pictures, you would kind of feel, or any people for that fact, it's kind of almost intrusive. So we make sure that when we go into neighborhoods, when we do these tours, we don't just go in and the term they use is to rape the neighborhood. We make sure that we always leave something there. We give back when we go to communities. We understand that people are very interested in learning, and thank God for COVID in that sense, because that really allowed people to sit down and start checking things out and said, hey, it's time for a change. So we sell this as a way for folks to learn and a conversation piece for many people as a jumping off point for communities to grow and gather and be together. And I then moved down to Emmanuel Mennonite Church. And I talk about how we lost our pool. We had a segregated pool that was there. And Pastor Matthew Bucher and I are very good friends. And we often talk about the effects of losing that pool and what that did to our community. Because this has been a system of let's move you, displace you, and take from you, move you to another place, limit your economic opportunities, and then begin to slowly take away from you again in other ways. This community has had the least amount of resources invested into it, and resources aren't always money. When I say that, a lot of people say, well, you know, we're doing this, we're paving streets, this, that, and the other. It's not all about monetary resources. I'm talking about putting the time into the community with educational resources. I think a lot about environmentalism. I think about how historically we have not been taught the same things that other people have been afforded in terms of environmental issues. And so therefore, we are now just beginning to struggle. I hear a phone ringing, sorry. We're now beginning to struggle with teaching family members about ways to make sure we're helping to save this precious earth that we are blessed with living on. So a lot of areas, because the resources weren't allocated fairly, we are still behind. So other opportunities have opened up, but we're still struggling to catch up with people in terms of living in areas where generally we have all the bus stops, all the loud noises, all the pollution, living in areas with a lot of lights from stores like Sheets that mess with the melatonin and kids aren't able to sleep. We're behind in so many different ways. So when I tell this story, I try to make sure that I weave in all of that information so that when we end, that we all walk away with trying to figure out how we can, one, give back, add to this community, and educate others about allocation of resources, equity, inclusivity, and fairness. And so this tour is not just about learning who lived in the Northeast neighborhood. We want to understand why we were placed in the Northeast areas, what decisions were made, who was sitting at the table at City Council and decided that the kids at Lucy Sims didn't need a yearbook, for instance, but the children at Booker T. Washington School in Stanton, the segregated school, has a yearbook that was produced every year and therefore have a wonderful history that people can always go back to and share with their children. I want to know the history about who made the decision that when they closed Sims, Lucy Sims, that we would just throw all of the trophies and records into a box and throw them in a corner, and then that history was lost. So this tour is much more about just the Northeast neighborhood. It's about being a part of a community and making a conscious decision that you are going to leave and make sure you make it a better community for others who live here. Let's go up. Let's see. I love when Robin tells this story. I don't go past this area, but I like Robin to talk about Miss Jenny's Tea Room and Chicken Shack. We can't hear you, Robin. Unmute yourself.
There's a lot of wonderful stories from the, as odd as it is, from the Jim Crow era, because that's the time when the community was really, really segregated, held up into the hills and the air, you know, in their own community. And there wasn't a literal wall, but there was a wall. But as a result, you had small businesses like Jenny's Tea Room, which was also called Jenny's Chicken Shack. That was the Robinson family, not related to Monica, however. They came down to Harrisonburg in the early 1900s from Philadelphia. And this fella, Charles Robinson, decided to and married a Jenny Long from our area, and they to make ends meet, to have their own business, had what they called the tea room at one point, and then it was also called the Chicken Shack. But it was on the first floor of what was known as the Colonnade. And the Colonnade, and unfortunately we can't find any real great pictures of the Colonnade, but the Colonnade was a public building that stood on the lot that you're looking at in this photo. And in there was a barbershop, the tea room. Upstairs, the upper floor was used as a gym for the Effinger Street School, which was a couple of blocks away, because the Effinger Street School, which was the African-American school during the Jim Crow era before Sims, did not have a gym or cafeteria. So it was just that they didn't include that when they built schools for these kids then. So they would have their gym classes on the upper floor of this building. But the Chicken Shack story is one, and I have to admit there were several families who did businesses like this. I'm not sure if the Chicken Shack was this story or not, but there was a little hut that they had a little cement structure that they had also in addition to this, where in theory you could go up on Friday nights and with $1 get your piece of chicken, a roll or something like that, and a shot of whiskey. And that was the Friday night after work celebration. So that was, I'm not sure if it was in that one or one of the Doris Allen's relatives, the Wrights, I think also had a chicken shack. So yeah, here it is, Charles Long and Jenny. And this is where we learn a lot of information about folks for sure, is on their licenses and death certificates. But it gives you the time frame. They married older. She was 39, he was 46, and it tells you where and things like that. And I believe they usually have some parentage. Yeah, there it is, Ida Thomas and Philip Robinson. So and where they came from. So it's we do a lot of genealogy. It's all private. This was done in addition to this site, which was public information, but we have connected with Charles' descendants from who remained in Philadelphia. And interestingly enough, at the same time period that he had his restaurant down there, his cousins were opening restaurants in Philadelphia in the Jim Crow era. And it just sort of shows that families often had passed down through the families, and all families, if they were electricians or if they were caregivers or educators or in the military, a lot of that often repeats. And this is the death certificate that shows what he passed of.
It says retired owner of Jenny's Chicken
Chicken
Shack.
Shack. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great history. And that's right across the street from the food co-op, you all.
Another place that I want to mention briefly is, oh geez, here we go. It's Miss Lena's store. Maybe I clicked it. Here. Growing up, I lived across the street. This is located on Kelly Street. And minus the signs and stuff, it's still, the building still exists. They don't have a store in the building. The grandson of Miss Lena, Henry and Lena Stewart, currently owns the property and owns the laundromat located in the Roses Shopping Plaza in Harrisonburg. But what's so great about Henry and Lena Stewart is they were one of the few couples who owned businesses that we knew about. Mr. Henry owned a boxing gym and a pool hall that was located in the Colonnade. And of course, they owned the store together. And so this is what we ran in the evenings if you needed a loaf of bread, or if you couldn't buy food there, but you could certainly buy small things, soda, a loaf of bread, milk. It was just a little corner store. But they were very influential in our community. The parents of Mr. Henry lived across the street, and his mother was named Miss Minnie Stewart. And so what I remember is running up the street from our house. We'd run up about to halfway up the block. We'd stop and sit on her porch, or she'd give us a popcorn ball, or we sit out there and talk to her for a minute. Then we jump off the porch and run back down the street. So we lived in a very safe place. And a safe place for us is a place that you are free from the white gaze. You're free to be who you are. You're free to live your life. You don't have to worry about, are we protected? Is someone going to call us the N-word? That didn't happen here. And you knew if your children were out and running up and down the street when they're playing, that at each house next door to us was a guy named Mr. Wardy, that he was going to be watching out for you. Then you run on up a little bit further. If you were doing something you had no business doing, Miss Minnie was going to tell you that you need to stop that, or she was going to tell your parents. Across the street from us was Mr. Don Burgess, who retired from the school system after probably 40 years. He was custodian at Waterman Elementary. I mean, he watched out for you. You know, he made sure you did what you were supposed to do. So it seemed like there were just enough people in the right places where you knew, or you at least felt some sense of safety. Because when we first went to Waterman School, it was very different from where I came from in Waterbury, Connecticut, where the class was full of brown and black people, you know, people who look like me, and maybe one white person, if that, or you see someone white when you went to the grocery store. And then now we're moving down to this community, and it's the complete opposite. The class is filled with everyone who doesn't look like you, and you may be the only the only black person in the classroom. But as you're walking up and down those halls, feeling kind of isolated and scared, there was Mr. Burgess, who walked past you and said, "Hey, you doing okay? Everything going all right? Run on up there now, catch up with your class, make sure you pay attention." So there were just enough people in our community spread out in various places that they kind of helped you make it through the day, kind of reminded you that someone is keeping an eye out for you, even in your parents' absence. So this store was big in our community, big. And Miss Lena, if you guys knew anything about Miss Doris Allen, Miss Lena Stewart wasn't Lena Doris Allen's niece? Am I telling that right? Or was Miss Doris Allen Miss Lena's niece?
I know they're related, and I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's Miss Lena's niece.
Yes.
Yep. So there's connections all through there. So that's where I go to next as we walk down Kelly Street. And then I normally just swing around, take a right at the bottom of Kelly, and then I go over. And I think this is very important to note too. And I'm just going to show you Lucy Sims' house, because I want to, more importantly, focus not on her house. I want to focus on Johnson Street. Johnson Street, where this house is located, was the hub of the Black community. That's the main street, I think, where most people lived. This was a safe place. They romped, they stomped, they run, they played. My mom and her 12 siblings lived on Johnson Street. And we talk about the old community center, which is now the home of our community place, the OCP office. So we talk about what the community center meant for them. And I talk about their community center, and then our community center, which was Sims when I was growing up. We didn't run across to the Cecil F. Gilkerson Community Center in Westover in the evenings. That's on the other side of town. We went up to Sims, where Carter Bundy, who was also a relative of Miss Lena and Miss Doris Allen, and he was the person in charge there. And we participated in sports. We played ball. We had books there that we read. We played school, and we ran around in a community center where many of our parents went to school at. So there was just this level of safety there that really made you feel at home. And so I wanted people to feel that love that existed and still exists in this community. And also talk about how, even though this community isn't filled with people now that look like me, it's filled with many different faces of many different colors, but it still is the same thing. It's a safe space for people here, for new immigrants here, for people who are coming from war-torn places and, you know, couldn't sleep at night. And now they're here in a community that's built on safety, that has been a safe place for many years and continues to be a safe place for our new members of our community. Trying to watch our time here now. Does anybody have a clue about timing? She said about 45 minutes and we're at 50. Okay.
Hetty, you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
so we think till about 12:30, maybe another 10 minutes. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, great. So
Maybe questions or answers? Maybe questions?
that's what I thought. I just wanted to point out that if you're interested or traveling, if you want to check out some of these other places, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Question, but a comment, say that pool, swimming pool in your neighborhood, it's the only pool that we could take our day.
Excuse me, you're gonna have to come up to the Zoom speaker because we can't hear you.
So for many years, we ran a day camp for the mentally and physically handicapped people in this community. It was called the Dandelion Day Camp.
Uh-huh.
And your pool there in the Northeast neighborhood was the only pool that we could take those children to swim in.
You're
So
kidding.
every summer we swam together in that pool with our day campers. So it has a rich meaning here in this church for us.
Oh, can you give us more information on that? I'd love to include that information in the tour, even if you have a photo or any just information about when the camp started.
Okay, I'm sure we can.
Thank you
I'm
so
sure we
much.
can.
Nancy Hopkins, Gerald.
Yeah.
Wondering about what time that area like where Roses is was developed and such.
Right after urban renewal.
It's
So
the early 60s, right?
the 60s. And see, urban renewal was based upon I call it the cloverleaf concept. And that is these cloverleaf designs of the highway of 81 that brought traffic into a city and out of the city. So although this was supposedly done to get rid of blight in the community, it wasn't. It was about the almighty dollar. And so the idea was when people got into Harrisonburg and they went around that cloverleaf, that they were going to end up coming down Market Street, and they were going to enter into places like Rose's Shopping Center to shop and so forth. But we know that didn't happen because people get off the interstate, they get something to eat, and then they get back on. So that Rose's was that area was purchased by some developers, and it's kind of been a mess in the last I would say 15, 20 years. As far as the parking lot, the owners don't keep the parking lot up. And I mean, I feel like sales in the store aren't what they used to be, but many, many people in the neighborhood still run to Roses on a regular basis. So Roses was developed. And then if some of you have lived here for a while, you'll remember there was Safeway in the parking lot where the Rockingham County building is at. A bank was there, there was Safeway, there was Pick and Pay Shoes, and then there was the CVS. So that was a little area there where you could go and take care of some basic necessities, pick up your prescriptions and so forth. And so that was thriving when I moved here and up through probably my high school years, because many of well, actually two of my teachers at Waterman Elementary School, they worked, their second job was at Safeway. One worked the cashier. Mr. Heiner and Mr. Beatty bagged the groceries. More questions, guys?
There were a couple phases of the R4 urban renewal. And so at one phase, there was a certain amount of destruction, and then a few years later, but it was this excuse of because destroying blighted homes. But on our website, valleybblackheritage.org, we have the R4 photos
Yeah.
from that were taken of the neighborhood and of the homes that were destroyed. And when you look at those photos, you realize that many were lovely Victorians. Also, the local history, oral history from the community goes that the houses and prior to them being destroyed and torn apart, and in some cases burned, they sprayed them with an acid, and then they took pictures of them. Also, it's some of the saddest stories hearing of families who lived in those lovely homes being told they had to leave, and they would be moved into another rental situation, and then eventually they would be moved further up the hill. But each phase of their movement, they were being told that that they were just being moved temporarily. They were fixing things up. They would be able to come back, and of course that just wasn't the case. So it's a very bitter pill for so many people. And unfortunately the development, well, no, I mean, unfortunately it was terrible happening all over the country. But in the Harrisonburg area, it was also a private developer who was part of the R4 destruction and renewal. And that's why a lot of it didn't really get to finally get developed, and ended up as broken ground for a long time. I also look at it as sort of a physical wall almost, because those were homes, the streets like Effinger Street, the other streets from up by the school, Sim School, that would continue all the way down. They continued down to Main Street, or to, all the way through Mason. But when they created that Mason and widened Mason Street and added those businesses, they literally created a physical space there to keep, separate one race from another, in my mind.
I agree, Robin. On the screen are some before, during, and after R4 photos. And David Ehrenpriest, professor at JMU, has written a book about Harrisonburg. And in there's a chapter on R4 and R14. And what I like about that is that it explains the history behind the project, that this was a nationwide attempt. So this same destructive process was done to African American towns, specifically all over the United States. And again, it said it was done to get rid of blight in the community, but actually it was really about economics. And so the people who made the decision to change these things on city council didn't look like the people who lived in the areas that they were getting rid of. So this is a very, very good slideshow to kind of give you a glimpse into how homes were raised, and you just really didn't have a choice. So
I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, and at the same time, the urban renewal was going on, quote unquote, in my town, my birth town. And I worked on a playground. I was when I was a teenager, and I was the only white person on that playground. And I got to know the families really well in the community, that the African American community that lived in downtown Annapolis. And if you're familiar with Annapolis, there's a marketplace area down in near the water, and off of that marketplace shoots diagonally several streets with lovely Victorians, beautiful homes. Always were. The families were taken from that community in those homes and moved across the creek to the other side of Annapolis, into an undeveloped area, and literally they lived in cement bunkers. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget driving by and looking at it and just not understanding why this was being done, especially since I knew all the kids and I knew all the families. But it was a national, sad to say, not a good part of our history.
And the book that we keep referring to, I just want to bring this up here too, is African American Property Ownership in Downtown Harrisonburg, 1850 to 1860. Now that covers 10 years and it changed my life. And that was written by Ryan Bachman.
And he actually had to hone in on those 10 years because there was so much information. But the fact is, there was African American property ownership as early as the early 1800s. The Peters family, the Gibson's family, they had property ownership that you can see in this book as well. But they were skilled saddlemen, known for their skills in those trades. And then the Strother family were known as well diggers and grave diggers, and they were also an early 1800s freeborn African American family. There were many.
When I went to Davis and Elkins College in West Virginia, and some of our students went to a place in DC. It was an area just blocks from the Capitol. And evidently it was a rather run-down area. And so they went in supposedly with what you were talking about. And there was a bunch of homes that they essentially bulldozed. And so there's this one street. On one side, you have the old houses. And then on the other side, you have high-rise apartment buildings and such. And at least when they visited, the tension there was very great.
Yep. Well, there was a reason for that. They took their home places and destroyed them and set back. The economically set back these families generations, and we wonder why we have such inequities. It's because every few years or every generation or so, white America has done something to stall any kind of forward movement that our African American friends were trying to achieve.
And we've gotten, I think most of these books, we've got them, they haven't been cataloged yet, but we're gonna have them in the library.
And we thank you for that.
Yes, I'm glad you're including them in your library. And also we have a library at the center. We have probably 1,000 books. We're building the library and we have checking out capabilities. So we are open on Thursdays. I'm there from 9 to 2. If you would like to come by and browse, see what the center looks like, look through the books we have on hand, or if you have books at home that are cluttering up your space that deal with African American history or the history of Harrisonburg, and would you like a place to donate them, we'd be happy to take them off your hands. Are there any more questions?
I'd like to just wrap this up by giving a big thank you to you, Robin and Monica. It's been fascinating and it's just whetted my appetite for learning more and what important work you're doing. And we're happy to be supporting you in just a few ways. And then I'd like to just mention to everybody, this will be a driving tour because my hips ain't walking very well these days. But people can choose to walk if they would like to, but driving is probably easier to get a sense of where everything is. And then at your leisure, another time you could come back and walk certain parts of it if you would like to. I would encourage you to either download the Traipse app, which I couldn't get onto my phone, but Stephanie was able to. That's probably the easiest way to do it, but you can also now print off the download of the instructions and the descriptions of the different sites. So we'll meet at 3 o'clock in the parking lot, rain or shine. And I'll do my best to take you on a tour. I'll be learning as well, but I think we can all do this together. And the guide, I think, will really help us a lot. And just yesterday, as I was driving around, it really opened my eyes to an area of town I don't go to very often. And I saw a healthy community that I think is thriving. And it just, again, whetted my appetite to learn more and to be a part really of where do we go next? Where do we go next? Because we can't stop here. Isn't that right, guys?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you so very much. Did you have any other parting comments, Robin or Monica?
I would just like to say that this is all, this is new territory for all of us. You all, me, Monica, everyone, because no one's really gotten into this history and done things like this. So there is no wrong way. There is no wrong answer other than not acknowledging it. And so thank you for taking the time to do the tours and learning, and we just hope you share and let others know about this great history. But it is something, it's been a learning experience for all of us.
I'd like to just add that I put my email address in the chat. If you would like to be added to our newsletter, just send me an email.
Okay, that's great.
Enjoy your
great.
tour today.
All right.